Hello, good afternoon, everybody. It's 4 o'clock. Okay, so this is the last session of the day here. It's a good crowd here. I'm Will Shafroth, the President and CEO of the National Park Foundation, and thank you for taking some time with us on your South by Southwest experience to talk about the reimagining of America's national parks. First of all, how many people have been to a national park in the last year? Yes, awesome. And how many have been to like more than 5 in the last year? Oh, good crowd, excellent. Okay, all right. Well, you know, I've been hearing about South by Southwest for a long time, and it's always just sort of the creative, the innovative, the cutting edge, and so you're probably thinking to yourself, like, well, what does innovation have to do with the national parks? Right? That's a legitimate question because it feels like it's one of these places. It's an analog experience. You're enjoying the outdoors and everything, but actually a whole lot, as it turns out. Innovation has been central to the whole idea of national parks. The National Park System was founded in 1960. The first national park site was Yellowstone in 1872. And the National Park System at the U.S. was the very first one in the world. And since then, many countries have emulated our national park system in their countries to protect important places, to interpret their history and culture of these countries, and educate and inspire people who visit them. So it's an amazing place that we were the first in the world, and a lot of places want to be like us. One of my favorite authors, Wallace Stegner, famously wrote, "National parks are America's best idea that we've ever had. Absolutely American, absolutely democratic. They reflect us at our best rather than our worst." And America's best idea has, as I said, inspired countries all over the world to emulate these places for preservation, conservation, and their enjoyment. And while our national parks are anchored across remote wilderness areas and rural areas and also within urban areas, that central idea continues to be evolving here at home. With every generation and frankly every administration in the last 100 years, national parks have grown, connecting people to what we all share, reflecting the cultural diversity of America, and even driving our economy. National parks are much more than destinations on a Rand McNally map at the end of a long road trip in a family station wagon. And for those of you who may not know what a Rand McNally map is, but it's a very, it's a large format, soft-bound atlas that we used to use in the car to find our way around the country. And I can still remember, like, my dad going, "Pull up the Montana map, Will," and so, we'd kind of go to page 47 and this big giant thing, and you'd have the whole state there and try to map the state and local and federal highway systems and find your way. Parks are also America's largest classroom. They're living laboratories that can teach us about lots of things, including climate resilience. They're the most protected places in our country, really. National parks are the places that have the highest conservation overlay on them, and so they're there for generations to come, and we can really learn about what's going on our planet. And they're places where a fuller and more complete story of America is told, a story that's dynamic and still unfolding, the good, the bad, and the ugly. Simply put, parks are forever, and they're for everyone, but they truly reflect this. They truly are the physical manifestation of our democracy. If you think about it, that we all in this room own an equal share of Yosemite and Yellowstone and the Lincoln Memorial. And as such, they are our common ground as a country, and they are where we come together as one people. So let me set the stage for you for this afternoon. If you visited a national park last year, which seems like everybody did, count yourself among the more than 325 million people who visited parks in the last year. 325 million. That's more than all professional sports, basketball, football, hockey, baseball, NASCAR. I mean, national parks exceed the visitation of all those combined by a lot. The park system is also huge, 85 million acres in total. That's larger than all of New England, Maine, Massachusetts, New Hampshire, Vermont, Connecticut, Rhode Island, plus New York State. And for those of you who are from the western part of the country, don't really relate to that part of the country, they would comprise the 5th largest state after Alaska, California, Montana, and Texas. Not in that order. We know Texas is second. Envision a state larger than New Mexico. And there are 429 national park sites, some of which, 63 of which are national parks, and there are many other designations, with at least one national park site in all 50 states. So just think about that. That's a pretty amazing network of places to go and to visit. Parks, the other thing is that people love our national parks, and this also drives significant economic activity. In 2022, visitors spent nearly $24 billion in the communities surrounding parks. We call them gateway communities. Parks supported 378,000 jobs and more than $50 billion in total economic activity across the whole country. They're huge. And I think the annual Park Service budget's at about $4 billion all in, Lena, and if you think about that, the $4 billion investment by Congress results in a $50 billion economic output. That's meaningful. And finally, most people think of national parks as places like Yellowstone and Yosemite and Big Bend, where you can go hiking and camping and enjoy the outdoors, but they're also places to tell America's story, whether it be Chaco culture in New Mexico, the Underground Railroad of New York that celebrates this critical work that Harriet Tubman did, or the history of jazz at the New Orleans Jazz National Historical Park. So keeping parks and the visitor experience at their best is a big job, and it's not one that has ever been done by government alone. For 50 years, we at the National Park Foundation have been dedicated to helping the National Park Service accomplish its mission through private philanthropy and innovative public-private partnerships. We work to protect wildlife and parklands, preserve history and culture, educate and engage youth, and connect people everywhere to the wonder of parks. Long before I arrived at the National Park Foundation, I was a kid in my family's crowded station wagon, 5 other of my siblings, embarking on road trips, usually with the 2 adults in the front seat smoking cigarettes and the windows rolled up. You remember what that felt like? We wouldn't do that today, but we did it back then. Finding inspiration at places like Cape Cod National Seashore, Mesa Verde National Park, and Rocky Mountain National Park. Now it's my job to inspire people to connect and protect these great places. And as you can imagine, it's a great job. And one of the most rewarding aspects of the mission of the National Park Foundation is working with the National Park Service and partners like L.L.Bean to look over the horizon at the future of national parks. So, what are the challenges and opportunities we have? How will we collectively address the significant increases in annual visitation as high as $500 million a year by 2050? How do we meet these future challenges and demands while protecting what makes these places special? That's what I talked about a second ago. It's like we've got to deal with this big influx of people, but we also need to, protect what's mostly important about these places. And finally, how do we do all this while maintaining and taking care of an inspired and essential workforce to manage and welcome visitors to the parks? The 22,000 full and part-time employees of the National Park Service who make our experience so great. That's the conversation we're having today, and I'm thrilled to dive in deeper on this topic along with Lena McDowall, and Deputy Director of Management and Administration for the Park Service, and Amanda Hanna, the Director of Brand Engagement and External Communications at L.L.Bean. Come on up. Welcome these guys. All right. Now we're into the, the fireside chat portion of the program. Listen, we got a lot of ground to cover, so let's dive right in. Lena, this is for you. Parks have never been so popular. Are you on?
Am I on? Nope.
No. Let's wait till we get her.
What about now?
There we go.
There we go.
Consider this, in 1916, the year that the Park Service was established, annual visitation was just 326,000. I just said there are 325 million who came last year. As you consider the mission of the Park Service, Lena, to welcome visitors while preserving the integrity of these natural and cultural spaces, how do you envision the management of national parks in the future, and how does this change with the evolving expectation of park visitors?
Well, first of all, it's certainly a challenge that our park managers meet every day, and it's never boring. But as you mentioned in your introduction, we have 429 park units, and they are incredibly varied, from the large parks that you think of when you think about the National Park Service to those smaller historic sites. And in the backdrop of trying to manage such a varied portfolio, we have a changing climate, we have increased visitation in some of these places, we have many of those places that have reductions in visitation. We're not seeing the same kinds of attention paid to some of these smaller historic sites that we have in the past. And what that means for the management of the National Park Service is that we are having to take a much more tailored, view to how we manage these places. We are moving far from that one-size-fits-all approach to management of public lands, management of historic sites. And you see us doing things to try to accommodate crowding or larger visitation in some of these larger parks. But you also see us experimenting with a number of things in some of these smaller places to attract more people to visit. So I think it's, when you look at places like parks that are embedded in urban areas, that community is looking to the Park Service to really be part of that community. That may not be the way that we have always managed in the past. So you see us doing more things to make some of these places less standalone, less sort of set aside, and really be part of that community and look at what we offer at that park that can help support that community and that helps tell a fuller story and lets that community be part of that place. I think in terms of visitors are looking for similar things from us. They're looking for a more tailored experience. I think visitors are interested in understanding how people like them experience that place. So whereas before we might put very general information about something, I think visitors really want to understand, how does this place specifically work for me? Am I going to be comfortable in this space? Are you going to make sure that I'm prepared to be here? And they're looking to the Park Service to provide more of that kind of experience. And I think we're going to talk a little bit more about that as we chat today.
So just to put a finer point on what you said, Lena, about some parks are having big increases in visitation, others are not. Isn't it true that about 40 of the top visited national parks amount to more than half of the total visitation?
Yes. Yeah. We have hundreds of sites that have fewer than 100,000 visitors a year.
Yeah, but the big ones that we all know are, and they will continue. If we go from 325 to half a billion people per year, that those are going to continue to be the ones that were a lot of the visitation. So that creates even greater challenge in some of those bigger parks.
Absolutely.
Great. Amanda, thank you again for being here. L.L.Bean is a great partner for the National Park Foundation and other national park sites in Maine, Acadia and Katahdin Woods and Waters among them. It's not only known for its products, which they're also great, notice my branding, but for having a long-standing commitment to outdoor recreation and ensuring all people can access and enjoy our public lands. Together with our partnership has expanded this work. What role are companies like L.L.Bean playing to support the efforts and facilitating access and innovation in national parks? And why is L.L.Bean doing this?
Yeah, thank you, Will. And
Uh-oh.
sure if I'm on. Hello.
Here we go.
Okay. Thanks for having us.
I didn't get you.
We are super excited to be here. To understand really L.L.Bean's involvement, I think you really have to go back to the origins of the company. So L.L.Bean is 112 years old. It really originated with Leon Wood, the man, hence LL, his last name Bean. Loved to hunt and fish in the state of Maine and really looked to solve a problem, which was he had very cold, wet, soggy feet and invented the bean boot as a result. And really, what we know is LL often talked about how the outdoors is where he would go to forget the mean and petty things of life. And that sentence really rings true for us, and we still really believe in that as a company and as an organization. And in fact, our purpose is to inspire and enable people to experience the restorative power of being outside. And so when we think about that purpose and really bringing it to life and the embodiment of it, we know through a lot of research and through a lot of studies that the restorative power really comes from the experience of awe, the power of awe. Being outside makes you feel smaller and this larger presence, and you experience something larger than yourself. And it has a ton of really positive impacts on relationships and on your health, mental, emotional, physical, spiritual. And what better places to experience the power of awe than in a national park and being outside. And so again, for us, this is just such a natural partnership. We fully believe in it. We're always looking for ways, again, that we can inspire and enable people to have that experience when they're outside. And so this is just a natural connection for us. And we're super excited and really energized about the work with Parks of the Future and how can we open that up and make that more available to more people.
So obviously you're in the outdoor apparel and equipment business, and that's a big part of what you're doing, but it's a little unusual, frankly, for a company to be leaning as much as you are into, expanding the visitation of these places and really leaning into communities that maybe historically have not been as involved in the outdoors. So talk a bit about that.
Yeah, I mean, we just believe there's so many benefits to time outside, right? And that should be as accessible as possible to everyone. And you see that in the way that we design our products often. We talk a lot about price point within our organization. So, for us, we are an outdoor company. We're rooted in the outdoors, and we're really focused on, folks who are just, you can define the outdoors as you would like. So it may be that you define outside as taking your dog on a walk around the block, right? Or maybe you're hiking in a national park every other weekend. We are not an outdoor company that we would say is sort of the pinnacle top of the mountain, if you will. We make technical gear, but that's not our core focus. That's not the only thing we do. And so, we have a wide variety of products that suit a wide variety of needs. And so that is one way that we really think about the accessibility of the outdoors. Again, just also our price point. We try to keep the products at a price at a very reasonable space so that as many people as possible can have what they need to safely and comfortably get outside. And so that is one of the ways that we think about accessibility. But then again, through our partners like you all, how do we help really, fulfill that in an even deeper and meaningful level?
Great, thank you. Obviously, in order to maximize the exposure of national parks to as many people and communities as we can, we need to use technology to accomplish that. And Lena, you alluded to this a minute ago in your opening comment, but tell us about how the Park Service is doing this. We're fundamentally, people are going to the parks to experience awe and wonder and beautiful places or be moved by an historical figure or circumstance. But we also carry our phones around with us, and we're constantly navigating the world through that device. So talk about that, a little bit of that dilemma, but also what you guys are doing at the Park Service to move that forward.
Sure. So, I think first off for the Park Service, we always want to talk about the authentic. It's really important to us that we maintain that sort of physical and tangible connection to the natural world and to our history and cultural heritage as Americans that I think Americans are looking for from us. At the same time, we also recognize that visitors want connectivity. They want to be able to use some of the same tools that they use in interacting with private companies or other government agencies to help facilitate their visits or help explore the national parks or how they might experience them. So we have, in the last few years, launched an app that we're really proud of. The Park Service, it took us many years to get there. We had a lot of different systems in place in the Park Service, and we were able to launch an app that applied to the entire Park Service. The Park Service was also a pioneer, back in the days when websites were first starting for government agencies, and so we're pretty proud of the work that we've done over the years with our mps.gov site. All of that said, I think we are recognizing that there's so much more that we could be doing. And so we are in the process of really looking at how we bring all of that work to the next level. So looking at the period from when you may be thinking about going to a national park through to actually planning your visit to being in the park, how you interact with the Park Service in the digital space, and then what you do when you come home from that visit. So, we're really looking at what I call supersizing our app, really allowing visitors to create profiles, create itineraries. We would like to do a much better job of connecting you to not just the parks that you've heard of, but all of the parks that are out there for you to explore. And giving visitors an opportunity to really talk about who they are in a profile and understand how others who fit that similar profile have experienced some of these places and figure out whether or not certain activities are good for you, or whether this trail is good for people with small children. Right now, I think visitors are having to navigate a number of different websites to do that, and we're really looking to change what we offer to be that authoritative source that makes it much easier to plan your trip, much easier to find out what's going on in the park when you're there, and then easier to interact with us and tell us what you thought when you come back. So we're pretty excited about where this work can go, and we'll hopefully start to be able to, you'll start to see some of those changes as visitors, in the next year or so.
I've had a chance to work with Lena on this project, and it's inspiring because it's really the end-to-end experience. And right now, I do it's a canoe camping trip in northern Minnesota every year in a national park up there, and it's not always the easiest. You have to go here and then you have to go there, and then you got to figure out who's the local group I want to support, because I had such a great time there. And I think what's great about what you're talking about is that it's going to be one-stop shopping, and you can go there and have the whole thing. And also, I know there's a whole lot of discussion around AI in the conference this year. This app will actually use AI to provide the up-to-the-minute updates of what's going on in the park. Road closures, trail closures, snow slides, or whatever it might be, to help you, not have to wait. What right now can be days or weeks before some of that information can be updated. So, hats off to you, Lena, and the team for moving that forward.
Yeah, and curious with that, as you think about the park experience, Lena and Will, it really is important to sort of preserve the essence of that experience, right? And so as you think about innovation, parks of the future, how are you thinking about balancing that with the in-park experience, and what do you see happening there?
So I talked about the need for that authentic, but at the same time, parks are very much for everyone, and we want everyone to feel like those spaces belong to them and that they're comfortable in those spaces. So there are lots of things we can do on the technology and innovation front to facilitate that. We look at things like AR or virtual reality that can help in situations where maybe you can't physically get to a particular location in a park. Augmented reality allows us to show you what a place might have looked like before, but it also can help from a universal design perspective, can help people of all different abilities experience that place as fully as possible. And so we really are looking at technology that can help us do that. Things like, and I'm going to use the wrong language here, but proximity detectors that, when you're close to a place, it gives you a bit more information. We are doing things like looking at, on your phone to be able to have audio described walks and things that are make a place more accessible. We also can use technology to prepare people to go someplace. I think when we think about folks who haven't visited parks a lot or are new to the park experience, some of the things that keep them from maybe doing that are fear of the unknown, not knowing what to expect when you get there, not knowing whether you're going to be prepared. And there's a lot we feel like we can do with things like the app, with some of the things I'm talking about, that can really arm potential visitors with the information they need to feel confident in making a visit to a national park. So those are all things that we think can really strengthen that in-park experience. But we also are looking at these technologies to help bring parks directly to people. The parks as classroom idea. There are so many parks and so many of these places. Most people are not going to get to all of them. And how do we make sure that we still have support for these places? Bringing that experience into a classroom, letting students experience a place through virtual reality. Those are all the kinds of things that we are looking at.
Yeah, a lot of great points. You were talking about bringing parks to people. I think 70% or more of the land mass of the national park system is in Alaska, and yet 1 or 2% of the visitation is in Alaska. And so what you just said, most people are never going to get to these places. How many people are going to go to Wrangell St. Elias? How many people have heard of Wrangell St. Elias? And so we need to figure out ways to bring parks to people. One of the things that happened during COVID is that because a lot of people couldn't get to these places, one of the things that we were able to do is to help to step in and give the Park Service and the local organizations that work with the parks some tools to do more of that, to bring virtual experiences so that people didn't have to miss their parks even though it couldn't be there. A great example is in Channel Islands National Park, which is based in Ventura, California, just right off the coast of Santa Barbara. They have a person who's in a scuba gear, and he or she is underwater, and they are piping a live feed into classrooms in various communities at a given time, talking about the coral, and kids are able to ask questions into the earpiece of this diver, and they're able to kind of talk about what's going on. And so, I mean, that's not super high tech, relatively speaking, but it's high impact in terms of your being able to really experience that happening. The other thing that we at the foundation have been able to help the Park Service do is to think about how to expand the audience for national parks. A lot of people grew up and parks were not necessarily part of their family experience. There weren't necessarily places that their family went on vacation. And so how do we create a sense of belonging for those people in our parks? How do we make them feel welcome when they do come? And so we've begun a program called Park Ventures, which is an attempt to really elevate leadership within diverse communities in our country so that they can have their own affinity groups to be going to the parks with and experience the awe and wonder that we all have. And that's a long game. It's something that L.L.Bean's been supporting us on, but also critically important. The other thing we've done is to try to bring Title I fourth graders into the parks through something called Open Outdoors for Kids. There's a huge impediment mostly around transportation, which keeps school kids from going to a national park for a field trip. Pretty simple, right? But in Southern California, within 45 minutes or an hour of Santa Monica Mountains National Recreation Area, there are millions of school children in the LA public school system. And so we've been able to provide bus transportation to a lot of those young kids, not only there, but all over the country. We've just passed the 2 million kid mark of mostly Title I fourth graders that have gotten into parks through these kind of experiences. Again, a way to expose different communities to the parks and the opportunity for them to experience the curiosity of these places and really open up their aperture of life. Like, wow, many of them never left their neighborhood. These are amazing places. I want to see more. So, yeah, good stuff. Lena, for you, Park Service employees play a really, really important role in safeguarding our national parks and providing visitors with memorable and educational experiences. How is the Park Service ensuring that park staff are adequately equipped and supported to address the evolving challenges and opportunities for the parks?
Well, you spoke about our 20,000 plus employees in your opening, and they're the heart of what we do. And we actually have our own ranger actually sitting here today. Carissa, are you here? Oh, there you are. Carissa will be around afterwards if you want to chat with her. Ask her questions. She has her hat, so she has superpowers to answer questions. But for every employee you see who is dressed like Carissa, there are many, many more employees in the National Park Service that you may never see who help bring those experiences to you as visitors. And there are a lot of things that we are working on in terms of challenges that we're trying to address to make sure that we are providing adequate support to all of our employees. The first thing I would say is that, like many private companies and other government agencies, the Park Service has staffing challenges we're trying to meet. We've hired our first full-time recruitment team, which is something we had never felt the need for before, to really try to address that. So if any of you are looking for opportunities, we're always recruiting. And closely related to staffing challenges is housing. A lot of these parks where we have employees that need housing are located in resort areas that are very expensive. So the Park Service is looking at many different ways, working with partners, looking at where we can lease housing, looking at how we better spend our investment dollars on housing to make sure we can meet that need. We are also doing a lot in terms of our own work environment and making sure that we have an inclusive work environment for our employees, that we are supporting all different kinds of employees, and that we're doing a much better job of recruiting for diverse employees in the National Park Service, both to make sure that employees who come from different backgrounds in the Park Service feel comfortable and see people that look like them around, but also for our visitors who want to see themselves reflected in the staff that they see out in our parks. I think on the budget front, the Park Service is lucky to have a lot of bipartisan support. And I think both from the administration and from the Congress, they do as good a job as they can, given the budget environment that we're in today, of providing adequate funding for the Park Service. All of that said, none of that happens, and the Park Service doesn't operate without a whole group of partners and philanthropists that help us accomplish this work. And I'd be curious to hear from you, Will. You and I have worked together on these issues for many years, and curious your perspective on how public and private partnerships and philanthropy can help with some of the things that we're talking about. You've talked about a few of them, but we've been working on a number of others.
We have, yeah. Lena's very politic in a good way about articulating the budget challenges. But it's serious. In 2010, I was working close to the Park Service in the Interior Department, and at that point, the Park Service had 15% more employees than they do today. The visitation's gone up about 20% since then. So you think about the lines are going in the wrong direction, and so part of the gap that we and the 400 plus park partners fill is to help the Park Service do things that maybe they could do before, but with the increased demands and increased interest by the population, we need to do more. And so we're helping to step into that, what used to be just called the margin of excellence, now it may be the margin of necessity in some cases, as well as the margin of excellence. So we're helping to support the Park Service in a variety of ways. You talked about housing, Lena. This is not an issue that has really been front and center on the issue of the Park Service for all that long. It's been percolating under the surface, but in the last 5 or 10 years, with the advent of Airbnb and VRBO, the price of housing in many of these gateway communities has skyrocketed, and employees can no longer afford to live there. If you live in Gardner, Montana, which is on the northern border of Yellowstone National Park, 15, 20 years ago, you could get a small house for $150,000. That same house is worth over $1 million today. And so you just can't have your workforce be subject to that. In the meantime, the park housing inside the park, where the Park Service actually provides housing for its employees and other people who work in and around the park, is also been in many cases 40, 50, 60 years old and hasn't had the kind of deferred maintenance investments along the way. And so we're finding that the amount of money that the Congress is budgeting for replacement or repair of that is not nearly enough to meet the demand. So we have begun to put a call out, if you will, to our philanthropic partners, foundations, corporations, individuals, and say, yeah, not only do we want to get young people in the parks, not only do we want to protect wildlife in the parks, not only do we want to interpret our important historical stories, but we need to take care of the people who are the heart and souls, as Lena said it, in the parks. And so happy to say that a few weeks ago we announced a $40 million donation from an anonymous donor to complete the housing projects in Yellowstone National Park. So 72 units, yeah. We really hope that will not only really take care of Yellowstone for a good chunk of time, America's first national park, but be an inspiration to people around the country to know that they can make the kind of impact in the parks around employee housing like they can in many other ways. And so it's inspirational for me to have been a part of this, but also kind of what we can do together going forward. So let's see, where are we now? The other thing I wanted to mention is that we've been trying to think about how we can be the Park Service's partner in some of these future-oriented issues. Housing, in a way, it's like, is it innovative? Well, maybe, but it's kind of a necessity in the parks. Digital technology is one that we've begun to support the Park Service on through some work with the Boston Consulting Group and developing this app. We've also looked at some other issues around Park Service authorities. The Department of Defense, for instance, has a much broader set of authorities than many other federal agencies around housing and energy development and management that we think we can use to help the Park Service save additional funding. And so we realize that we have a big portfolio of things that we're already doing with the Park Service, and so why not kind of formalize that in a way and create what we're thinking about as more like a think and do tank, like helping the Park Service anticipate some of these issues that are coming down the road in the future, better understanding what the solutions are, how can the private sector and nonprofit organizations be helpful in that, and then raise enough money to start funding pilot projects and incubate ideas in the parks, because honestly, the Congress is not the quickest to act on these things. No offense to them, but they just approved the budget for the Park Service last Friday for this fiscal year. And so for the Park Service to rely on Congress to fund things that are coming in the future is just not practical. So we're working with L.L.Bean and other companies and private funders to support those notions so that we can help the Park Service really not be overwhelmed by what's coming, but anticipate it and hopefully get on top of it.
And I will add that it's very helpful for a group like the Park Service to really be able to think through some of these, and sometimes not very sexy issues, right?
Yeah.
But that really do get in the way of us meeting our mission. These are challenges that a lot of other organizations face, and it's helpful to have groups like the National Park Foundation and companies like L.L.Bean play that convening role to bring lots of new ideas to the table. I mean, to me, innovation is, maybe a new way to tackle an existing challenge or an old challenge. It doesn't necessarily have to be a fancy tech solution, as you say. It's a new solution, maybe something we haven't tried before, and I think the Park Service is much more willing to experiment, I think, than we have in the past at how we solve some of these issues.
That's great. By the way, there'll be a couple more questions, and then we're going to open it up for you to be thinking about what question you might want to ask related to anything we've talked about or something we haven't talked about. We're not going to talk about L.L.Bean's return policy or the bean booths, okay? And we're not going to take campground reservations from Lena either, okay? That's off the table. Amanda, this is for you. As we look to the future, what are some of the emerging trends or innovations that you believe will shape the future of our national parks?
Yeah, it's a great question. And I mean, just tagging on to what you're saying too, I just want to express gratitude for everything that you both do, because at the end of the day, we just want to help people get outside, right? Like, we want people to fall in love with the outdoors. And you guys are really on the ground tackling these issues and understanding them and getting underneath them. And so to your question, Will, what are the trends? What do we see emerging? What I think is really interesting is just even, Lena, the way you're talking about sort of the experience of, sort of the customer journey is what we would call it, right, at L.L.Bean. And so, do you want this piece of information from this website? And how do I personalize my trip? And how do I plan for that? I mean, that's how we and, most other retailers and anyone, serving their customer today is thinking about that. What is the customer journey for my brand? And so, I think there's a lot of shared learning there as we're all navigating personalization. For us, we're a direct-to-consumer company, one of the oldest. Many of you probably get our catalog, but most of our sales come through e-commerce. And so, not only am I ordering from a catalog, am I going online to find a product? Oh, I may want to go into the store, but the store may not have it. So then I need to ship it from a warehouse, right, to the store, or I just may want them to ship it home, or I may be shipping you a gift. So I just think there are a lot of interesting parallels there and journeys as we think about how are you building your L.L.Bean experience and how are you building your experience to visit a national park. At the end of the day, we all want to make it seamless. We want to make it easy. We want to make sure that it's personalized and accessible for everyone. And so we're doing a lot of work on our side. I can't tell you that I have the answers for that innovation and what that looks like, but there's obviously a lot there as we think about it. And I just think, as we are all, facing just the mental health crisis that exists with all of us on our phones more than ever, with the rise of digital, just the importance of time outside and being able to spend time outside. And again, the positive benefits of that for our mental health, our physical health. We know from research, pro-social behavior improves, so our relationships improve if you spend time outside with someone. And so just how do we keep that simple and easy for everyone? That's really kind of our mission, again, and purpose at the end of the day, and what you guys are really helping us all figure out and solve for.
Good. You want us to respond, Lena?
Yeah, no, I mean, you're absolutely right, Amanda, about the customer journey, and we refer to it as the visitor journey in the Park Service, but it is, I'd say, fairly new for us to really start thinking about what we offer in the Park Service in that way. And it is, I think, opening up many opportunities for us to look at how we have been providing programming, how we structure spaces, how we even design visitor centers, and all kinds of just interesting avenues that we haven't gone down before. I think that's one of the things that is very much emerging in the Park Service right now is, how do we use some of these new technologies to help improve that experience? You think about, when I think about historic sites, and I know we spend a lot of time talking about these large natural parks, but when we think about digital innovation in the Park Service, one of the places where we think we have the most opportunity is in historic sites. One example is that the Park Service used to do things like build replicas. You've probably as a kid gone to a replica fort, but most people have. We don't necessarily do things like that anymore. We can use AR to really show someone what this place was like as a living, breathing place, and in some ways maintain its authenticity without that physical connection. And you'll see us doing more of that. I think that is a trend that is very much emerging. We have trends in mobility, electric vehicles. We are in the process of really trying to make sure that we can accommodate large numbers of electric vehicles, people on road trips in their electric vehicles. We are changing our fleet to hopefully get to zero emission vehicles with most of the fleet. And then things like automated shuttle systems and things that help people move around parks. All of those are things that are emerging trends in the Park Service. And I think the last one is one that you started hearing us talk a lot about during our centennial year in 2016, which is telling the fullest story, the fullest American story that we possibly can. And that is work that continues in the Park Service, and that will probably be never ending. But I think it's great for the Park Service. It has been great for the Park Service to kind of see the reception to some of these places that communities who never felt a part of the Park Service, who never felt a part of parks, have really been able to see themselves in what we do. And I think our emerging challenge is to make sure that every site speaks to every American, that it's not just, we're not creating sites for specific groups of people, but that every American sees their story in some of these places.
So just a quick note for Amanda, thank you for reminding us a couple times here about the importance of just being in the outdoors and experiencing the awe and wonder, and the multiple benefits that accrue from that. There's a great book called The Nature Fix by Florence Williams that actually talks about that, and there's like the science behind this. It's not just something that we kind of know because we've all experienced that in an emotional or visceral way, but also we've done some interesting scientific analyses of this, which I encourage you to look at that. I was thinking about this topic today, and I thought, innovation doesn't just have to be a tech answer, but it can also be how we do our work. And I was reminded in talking to Amanda about the establishment of the Katahdin Woods and Waters National Monument up in northern Maine. And that was done through the generosity of Roxanne Quimby and her family. Roxanne founded Burt's Bees and accumulated 130,000 acres of land over time as a thank you to the people of Maine who basically helped start and advance her business over the years, which started in the backwoods in a off-the-grid cabin. Her husband was a beekeeper, and she was harvesting mint from the fields and created this little lip balm that turned into a billion-dollar business. And so the family donated this to the national parks, 90,000 acres. The foundation was very involved in that. And at the dedication ceremony in Maine in 2016, at the end of which a member of the Penobscot Nation came up to Lucas St. Clair, Roxanne's son, and said, congratulations, this is an amazing accomplishment, appreciate this opportunity. But I was surprised that you didn't really say anything about the fact that this was our land. And it literally stopped Lucas in his tracks. I mean, this is a very thoughtful, educated, open-minded, progressive person. And he said it was the moment in my life where I just realized I had a gigantic blind spot. And so from that moment forward, in the last 8 years, he and his family have dedicated themselves, along with the Park Service, to ensuring that the voices of the Wabanaki and the Penobscot Nations are absolutely included in everything that's done to build the visitor center, name the trails and build campground facilities and put-ins and takeouts on the rivers to ensure that they're involved in all this. And that's more of a how we do our business than the changing of our digital technology. How we think about the work that we do and who we include in those conversations, and how we are really co-stewarding the lands across the country with tribal nations is a critically important part of how we are going forward in a different way. So I just want to acknowledge that it doesn't have to be just the gadgets and the things like that. And the other thing I would say is that we're doing a little differently is that we're thinking about the work that we do together. I mentioned it. There are 450 official park partners. There are also concessionaires in most parks. There are how many volunteers? 1 million volunteers in the Park Service? Jenny, I don't know, something like that. Let's say 1 million. We're going to say 1 million.
Hundreds of thousands.
There's a lot of volunteers, and historically, a lot of those groups and individuals have been working very independently in their own little silo, and what we're really trying to figure out is how do we bring those together as part of one park community to ensure that we're all kind of working towards the big goals together. And I think if we do that, we're likely to get a lot more done. So thank you for responding to that. We're now going to enter the question and answer period time. Jenny has some microphone. Is there another microphone that we have available? There's one here. If you have a question, we're going to please ask you to ask questions. We're going to stay around afterwards, so if you want to have a conversation about something and you want to make a speech, we'll have plenty of time to do that. So come to the microphone and ask your question. Thank you very much.
Hi, thank you all for being here. I have a complaint.
Okay.
The passport book that you sell in your gift shops needs more pages. Because I've got 2 that are almost full. I'm going to need to go to a 3rd at some point. But I love and appreciate what you folks do. And I was wondering, I know this is a risky question for you because somebody might feel slighted, but can you give me some examples of some hidden gems or quote-unquote undiscovered national parks that you would really like to shine a light on? And the second part to that question is the number of parks going up or down. I could see maybe it's going down because of budget cuts, or is it going up because you're setting up new places for people to visit? So I guess kind of 2 questions here, but thank you.
Lena, why don't you start with the first one?
I thought of 2 hidden gems off the top of my head, both in California. California on the brain today. Lassen, up in Northern California. I love that park. It's close to where I went to grad school. And then Mojave National Preserve, which is down in the desert near Joshua Tree. I've had some amazing nights in that park looking at the night sky, and I think it's such an undiscovered spot. So highly encourage you to visit those 2 places.
Amanda, any from you?
Oh, goodness. Seaport? Is that one of our... In Boston Harbor? Yeah, that's a new... I'm an Atlantan who recently moved to Maine not too many years ago, so I'm still discovering all that New England has to offer, so enjoying everything in Boston.
I would say also, a lot of people go across the northern band to hit Glacier and Yellowstone and Grand Teton, but in between there we've got a Little Bighorn National Historic Site, which is where Custer's last stand occurred. You've got Devil's Tower National Monument in northeastern Wyoming. You've got Theodore Roosevelt National Park up in North Dakota, just north of there. There's a bunch of them that don't have that much visitation that are really interesting to look at up there. So, and the second part of the question?
Now I'm trying to remember the second part of the question.
Are increasing...
Oh, they're definitely on the increase. So we're at 429. I think that's 10 above where we were last fiscal year. So we have been growing quite a bit.
Mostly it's through national monument designation. So presidents have the ability to sign an executive order that sets aside either private land that's been donated to the government or public land that is managed by another federal land management agency, usually the Forest Service or Bureau of Land Management or Department of Defense, that comes to the Park Service. And so I think every president since the authority was established under Teddy Roosevelt have used that authority to establish new units in the national park system. Sir.
Hi there. My name's Greg Gowder. A big part of my journey to becoming an Eagle Scout and then running a nonprofit actually happened because of the National Park Service and filling up several of those passport books. So thank you for that. My question concerns sustainability and accessibility for the parks that aren't as close to urban centers or that aren't places that people who don't have access to a car would be able to get to as easily. I'm curious what transportation alternatives might be considered to allow people who don't have access to a car to reach some of these places. And I'm also curious whether there's any interest in reviving the old Civilian Conservation Corps lodges that were built in the 30s that are absolutely beautiful and amazing experiences, like the ones on the Blue Ridge Parkway that I grew up in, basically. Is there any interest in bringing those spaces back, bringing back the amenities like them to create affordable and accessible opportunities for families to stay in these places?
All right, Lena.
Yeah, so I'll take the second question first. So I think, what there are a couple things when we look at lodging in national parks. So I don't think that we have a lot of spaces right now where we have a lot of new building going on. I think we are trying to make sure that some of those kinds of places that you talk about, that we are renovating some of them. We're doing a number of rehabilitation projects on CCC era lodging to make sure that we continue to have a wide range of lodging available to visitors in some of these places. I don't know off the top of my head of places where we're doing a lot of brand new lodging. I think there's always that tension between, is this something we build in a park, or do we really rely on the local community and make sure that local community has opportunities for economic development that they might want to have outside the park? So it's still kind of a balancing act, I guess I would say. Let's see. Remind me of your first question.
Transportation question.
Yeah, transportation. You should.
Yeah, so I mean, obviously people can rent a car if they don't have one, which is probably the most likely solution to getting some of these remote places, because there really isn't going to be bus transportation or air transportation to get there. But I'm going to combine your questions a little bit. In the very early days, the railroads actually built the lodges in most of the parks, and they had direct rail line service to some of them. So there's a little bit of that here and there around the system. But I think that you just have to look at the places you want to go and figure out, all right, what's the best way to go. I was just in Jackson, Wyoming last week, and if you get yourself to the airport there, you don't really need a car after that.
There's the L.L.Bean Island Explorer bus, in Acadia.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, go ahead.
Yeah. No, I mean, it is. It's an island, and obviously Acadia is super busy national park, and congestion in and out. There's nowhere to park, and so we did in our partnership. There's a bus, and you can hop on it and do the loops, and it does make access to that park much easier, and it takes you sort of out of the traffic congestion and the complications of that. So it's one of our favorite features for sure. And bike racks, the whole thing, you can just hop right on there. And that's a small example, but it is an interesting one.
Yeah. And in places where we do have some access to public transportation, we are piloting or have had arrangements that we've had in place for many years. Like I think of Yosemite even, that's a park that's in a rural area, but there is a public transportation system that allows some level of public transportation into the park. So we have been looking for more opportunities like that, and in a lot of ways to deal with too many cars.
Yeah. And as we transition to the next question, stay tuned. We have some exciting transportation announcements during National Park Week, a month from now.
Good. Yes.
My question is about telecommunications, both for convenience, education, and for safety within the parks. My general experience has been that I don't have cell phone service on most of the roads and hikes within the park until I get to a peak, which is a great incentive to peak, summit the peak. But where is that? Is that by design? Is that a feature? Or is that a flaw?
I would say it's not by design necessarily. I don't think I would have answered that question probably differently 15 years ago, because I think there was a much more tension between the idea of providing connectivity in parks than there is today.
I'd love to use your app, but generally that would not be possible without Starlink, which I think is that the solution?
We do have to work with cell phone companies to make sure that we have cell phone access or cell phone connectivity, but we are looking at other technologies that can help bridge the gap. So, you see us doing things with Wi-Fi in parks. We've got a big initiative to improve broadband in parks. Like many rural areas, it's something that we really have issues with. We've got employees that are working on essentially dial-up connections. And if employees have it difficult, you can imagine how difficult our visitors have it. So it is something that's on our radar, and we do want to make improvements to make it so that you can use the app, so that you can use digital passes, and for safety reasons. At the same time, we know it's going to take us a bit to get there, so we do make sure that when we roll out tools like the app, that they're still really useful in an offline mode.
Thank you.
I still think there's a bit of a tension, though, between the issue of what you're talking about is like, okay, if you're in a campground or a visitor center, there's likely going to be Wi-Fi there. But if you're like a mile and a half in the backcountry,
Right.
do you really want to have cell coverage and somebody's phone going off? Maybe for safety purposes, but I mean, it's a question that you need to think about, because you don't necessarily want to, you're trying to get away from all this. And so I think these are the policy questions the Park Service is having to wrestle with, because it's probably 50-50.
Yeah, and I will say we are not working to make sure we have full connectivity in the backcountry. I mean, we have our hands full in the front country, sort of really populated areas of parks. But there are great new gadgets now that can make it a lot safer for you to be out there without cell phone connectivity that I know I take advantage of, and I think are, those little Garmin spots and things like that can help with those types of issues.
I think we've got time for about another question or two.
Great.
All right, I'll make it quick. I'm an urban planner, and I love cities mostly, and so I do a lot of city hiking. Lived in D.C. and had the luxury of mini parks in the city environment. Franklin Park being one of the most coolest thing I think the National Park Service has done in the urban landscape. And so I was just thinking about, within that spectrum, most of the populace are within urban areas, and the acquisition of parks from a city standpoint, in order to better provide an amenity within, say, municipalities that don't have the budget to invest in their parks as regularly. So just any thoughts on that, how could that be accomplished, et cetera?
So the Park Service does manage some pretty large grant programs that help with city and those kinds of local parks. We have whole programs that don't work in national parks at all. They really are totally focused on providing funding and technical assistance to urban areas, rural areas that are trying to make sure that they have outdoor spaces available for their citizens. And this is an area that has grown quite a bit in the Park Service over the last number of years and continues to grow. I think there's a lot of interest in the Park Service lending funding and expertise to those types of projects.
It's called Rivers and Trails Conservation Assistance Program.
RTCA, yep.
RTCA.
Yep. And the Land and
Come
Water
up afterwards.
Conservation Fund has a large state grant program that provides grants to states for recreation.
Like $400 million, right? So it's big
Huge.
program.
Yep.
Yeah, final question.
Hi, thank you so much for this panel. It's very informative. So I used to work with the Colorado DOT, Department of Transportation. We offer public transportation access to Rocky Mountain National Park, one of the biggest national parks in the country. I was just thinking about a single tool, in terms of transportation, information of how to access these national parks, have a whole list of them, of the location, and then information about how to get to the park via public transportation or, private transportation. Just does that tool exist?
So right now it exists on individual park pages. So if you look on the Park Service website or in the app for a particular park, it provides all kinds of information on how to get to that place. I think what we would like to do is make it easier to access that information, and those are some of the things that we're talking about with some of these advances we're hoping to make in our digital presence.
And put it all into one.
Maybe being able to search by
Search.
parks that are available on public transportation, for example. I don't think we have that functionality now, but that would be a good thing to have.
Good to know. Thank you.
Well, thank you all for coming. We're going to be up here for a while. Yeah, thank you.